I'm gonna try something here. Be in the present moment and just talk. I don't know how much I have to say, but I figure just practice talking to you guys off the cuff, off the top of my head, see if anything interesting happens. I don't know if you guys know who Eckhart Tolle is. He's a spiritual teacher. He wrote a book called The Power of Now and also A New Earth. He gives talks all over the world, and he has kind of it's not kind of, he has a central theme, and it's the present moment, being present, and how important that is and how central it is. And he talks, one of the things he says about it is that compared to other priorities, it's definitely first. If there was a purpose for a human being to be on this earth or in this realm, he would say the number one purpose is to cultivate your ability to be present in the moment. And along with that is the cessation of thought. He had an experience when he was 29 years old after being severely depressed and anxious, and fearful, and angry and sad, all those emotions that come up in us mortals. And one day he was in his bed and having a really difficult go, and he said to himself, I can't live with myself anymore. And apparently when he said that to himself, he had this realization that who's I and who's myself. And I don't know the story, it doesn't really matter. I think he fell asleep, and then he woke up the next day and he was experiencing a tremendous amount of peace. He was calm, he was able to see the world in its beauty, he was present, he wasn't trying to get to another moment, he wasn't fearful of the past, and all of these things that there's a term that Buddhists call it. I don't know Buddhists terms, but samsara, or some sort of enlightened state, basically, and a guy named Ken Wilber is another guy I might talk about at some point. I've read a lot of his stuff, but I can't. His integral theory is very complex, although it's also very simple, which is strange. But anyway, he would say that there are two things that happen to people on their way to enlightenment, and that is a state of consciousness, like an elevated state, which would be a temporary state where you feel present and your emotions aren't running you, and you feel peaceful and you see the beauty, all of those things that Eckhart Tolle was experiencing. And then there's also a stage, which is a permanent, it's like you level up and you stay there. And a lot of yogis and lifelong meditators will experience stage, and then a longer stage, and then a longer stage, and then a shorter stage, and then a really long stage, and then until they transcend to a state, short state, long state, and then at some point they'll graduate to this stage, this permanent stage of enlightenment. And there are a handful of people in the world that claim to be enlightened. People travel to India just to be in these folks' presence. Some people will say that if you're in their presence, that vibration rubs off on you and you experience that state of consciousness, either temporarily or even permanently. But being in their presence is powerful, apparently. It's kind of like, for me, when I'm in the presence of a great musician or a very successful entrepreneur, it kind of rubs off on you, like you start to understand how they think just by watching them act and watching them talk and listening to them and just feeling their energy. It's almost like it rubs off on you. That's why people will say, the 5 people around you are the sum, or, if you average the success, intelligence, spiritual levels of enlightenment of all the people that you surround, of the closest 5 people that surround you, well, that the average is going to be you. So that's why a lot of coaches will tell you to level up your network, and go and find other people to associate with if the people with whom you're associating currently are not where you want to be, And a lot of people that are where you want to be don't want to associate with you, so you have to find somebody who's willing. That's why mentorship and apprenticeship is one of those things that really needs to come back into our culture, because not that it doesn't exist, it just doesn't exist like it used to. At least from what I've been told. I don't know. I think it was more common back in the day to be an apprentice and have a mentor but just deciding that you're going to be friendly and cultivate friendships with people that are more successful than you can't hurt. It definitely can't hurt. And to mitigate the time that you spend with people that are not doing what you want to do. So basically what happened to Eckhart Tolle, and it took him a long time to figure out what happened because he just didn't know what it was that he was experiencing. And so he kind of read some books and talked to some folks that knew a little bit about, spiritual states and what was going on with him. And he eventually figured out that he had stopped the incessant thoughts of his mind. He was in control of his mind, I guess you could say, or he just didn't. He could have a thought come into his mind and not have it stick there and cycle and loop and basically take over his emotional or intellectual cognitive state. He just didn't let them attach to his consciousness, and that alone gave him the tremendous amount of peace. He talks a lot about how we all go through the 4 stages of consciousness in every 24-hour period if we sleep, and if we sleep deeply. I'm not going to say which those are because I can't tell you, but there's the waking state, and then there's the right before sleep state, and then there's the sleep state, and then there's the deep sleep state, which is, there are names for it, I don't know them, but it talks a lot about when you are falling asleep and you're just on the edge of sleep and you feel peaceful, like all of a sudden your worries kind of subside and you just kind of go off into sleep. It's like this little window of time where you're not thinking. Your thoughts are suppressed. And he says that that's a lot like the way he feels, although he's fully awake and conscious. And he says the difference between that state and his state is he's above thinking and that state is below thinking. So it's kind of like, it's what drugs do to you as well, or alcohol. It helps you slow your mind down. Alcohol basically just kills brain cells so that it just, I don't know if it's too tired to think or it's too shocked to think, but it allows that state of being, of that presence, and that just that relief from our incessant thought patterns. And then there's mushrooms and weed kind of do the same thing. And the way Eckhart Tolle talks about it is those things are bringing you below sleep or below thought, and so they temporarily give you some relief, but you're not learning how to go above thought and to Just let those thoughts pass through your mind. And he says that all suffering comes from thought and emotion, and not just thought and emotion, but attachment to thought and emotion. So, and then there's the intertwining of the thoughts and the emotions, where you have a thought and it creates an emotion, and then the emotion creates another thought, and then there's a looping happening between your intellectual mind and your emotional being. And it's a battle, and we all experience it. So he says that when you're able to just not attach to that thought, it doesn't get intertwined with your emotions, and then you don't have that loop. Or vice versa, when you have an emotion, you feel the emotion for what it is, but you don't attach meaning to it, That's why he cautions sometimes against a lot of therapy, because then we're associating or identifying, attaching our emotions to a particular event or a particular person, and then it takes away from embodying and feeling that emotion and for what it is, just simply an emotion. Doesn't always have to be attached to anything. And he says the more detached you can become from the meaning of an emotion, the more easily it will process through you and teach you what it needs to teach you without creating a bunch of other potential meanings or additional emotions or additional thought patterns that create suffering. What can you do about that? How can you get there? And there's another layer of it, which is, we're so conditioned to think our mind is our greatest tool. And if we stop thinking, well, then we won't get anything done, or nothing will happen, or, and what he says is the mind is actually, it's a great tool, but it's not our most powerful tool. Our most powerful tool is being a channel for wisdom, universal wisdom. And your mind basically only gets in the way of that. And I'm, right now, I guess you could say I'm channeling, because when I turned this camera on, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. In fact, I thought I would just have a bunch of random thoughts and cut them up into little clips later, but apparently this is going to be the theme for today. Maybe it'll be a shorter theme, I don't know. But another thing that he talks about in his lectures, which I highly recommend that you just go on YouTube and you click on Eckhart Tolle and you subscribe to him and you listen to the stuff he puts out for free. 10-minute clips almost every day, and they're just amazing. Again, he talks about a lot about the same thing, but he has different ways he calls them kind of like road signs to what he's really talking about. Words will never really encapsulate truly what he's experiencing. Words are only a limited facsimile of the state of presence. But listening to him, it definitely can't hurt, because he's always in a state of presence, so he's also got that energy and that vibration that you can kind of tap into, even though it's a YouTube video. But he talks about how he never has anything planned that he's going to, he doesn't know what he's going to talk about. He says, when I get on stage and I sit down, a lot of times I won't talk for a couple minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, and I'll just kind of look around. And a lot of people think that, he says, a lot of people think that I'm just doing some sort of grounding or connecting or some sort of spiritual thing. And he says it's not that at all. It's just because I don't have anything to say yet. I don't know what I'm going to say. So he's just waiting or just being in the moment, letting that thought or that word or those words come to him. And inevitably, eventually, he
starts to talk, and his talks go where they're going to go. And I guess because he only has really one central theme, he has a lot to say about it and doesn't run out of something to say. I claim no ability to be present. In fact, my threshold of presence is probably, 5 seconds. Maybe I've held presence for 30 seconds at a time, here and there. But I'm always battling my thoughts and trying to come back to the present moment. I'm just, redirecting my mind. I'm talking about when I'm in meditation. My meditation practice is as basic as you can get, which is, from what I understand, there is nothing more to meditation than sitting quietly and not talking. And there are mental exercises that you can do to redirect your mind back to the present moment. And sometimes I do those, and sometimes I just let my mind go where it wants to go. And if I remember to not attach to a thought, well, then I sometimes have the ability of letting that thought go and coming back to the present moment. But most of the time, when I'm in meditation, I will suddenly realize that I've just had a whole liturgy of thoughts, and it's like a battle, because I just am attached to my thinking, and I'm attached to the emotions that it brings up within me, and I go into this cycle, and I can't stop it. Some people will say, well, you don't ever want to try to control your mind, you just want to observe your mind, which is kind of the first level of becoming aware of your thoughts, just to observe them. And I think that's the first level of a lot of different practices, like weight loss or any sort of discipline, is just to observe where you are now. Get a real good grasp of where you are now. Like, track your calories and track your weight. Don't try to change anything, just become aware. Understand the math calculation that when you eat X amount, you gain X amount. When you eat this amount, you lose X amount. So you start to understand where your metabolism is and how much you can burn, and your maintenance calories. And that's kind of what it's like to start to observe your mind when you're meditating. You're just trying not to have any judgment around your thoughts and your inability to stop thinking. You're just watching it. You're just saying, I'm thinking a lot right now. Yep, my mind is going. And sometimes just that observational exercise allows you to let it go. You have in the back of your consciousness this intention, let it go, so it naturally just starts to let it go once you notice your incessant thought patterns. And he's actually not a big proponent of just chin practice. I think, and I've heard him say this, it's like, it's not something you do. You don't, it's not an active thing to be present. I don't know if that's right, but it's like active and passive at the same time. If you're truly present, you're not really doing anything. You're not thinking, you're not experiencing an emotion, well, maybe you are, but to just constantly come back to the present moment in your regular life is what he says is the true practice. And I meditate almost every day simply because I think it just brings more awareness to what my brain is doing. And sometimes I'll come out of a meditation and I'll think, boy, I'm really, really worried about finances right now. My whole mind is just centered around my ability to pay my bills this month. And I think that's probably a lot of what my negative pattern of thinking centers around is like survival, and I think we're just programmed at an early age to constantly be, especially men. Women have other concerns as well as survival. But they think about it in a little bit of a different way, I think. I'll just speak to what I think men are. Men are programmed to provide and protect and make sure that the bills are paid, and when that isn't happening easily, we get anxious and we get worried and we concern ourselves with that. And while thinking and problem solving is definitely a useful tool, basically he says that the problem is it's like if we had a pencil in our hand and we just couldn't ever stop writing, and we were just scribbling and writing things that don't matter and writing things that don't help and writing negative thoughts and just constantly writing, and you could never put the pencil down. That's what most of our minds are doing at all times. They're just writing and writing and writing and writing, and we have no control to just put the pencil down and be in the present moment. But when you become in control of your mind and you can turn it off, it's like your mind is, and I've talked about this before, your mind is like a bottleneck, really, to universal thinking or universal consciousness. And like if you look at all of the great geniuses, even the great songwriters, you ask them, well, where did that song come from, or where did that idea come from? And they say, I have no idea. I woke up in the middle of the night and I wrote the whole song, or I sketched out the whole chemistry problem or physics problem, and that's it. And it didn't come from their mind, it came from them being open to this universal intelligence. We get so concerned about problem solving, and we don't realize that the problems are mostly in our mind. 90% are in our mind. And if we can turn our mind off, the solutions are right there. It's like a mask, it's like a veil, that once we can stop that and push that aside, then all of a sudden we see reality, we see it clearly. So in my life, I have a waking practice to constantly come back to the present moment. I do it a lot when I'm hunting. I'm able to bring myself back, look at the trees, not watch myself in anticipation of hearing or seeing a deer, and try to be in the moment and enjoying nature. And then I do it my creative life and my business life, and realizing that there is no other moment to get to. You are right where you're supposed to be, and all of the experience that you're having is right there, and there's nothing else to be had. I think about some of the things that I've been through that are difficult, whether it's learning a martial art, or learning to shoot my bow, or studying, or being in uncomfortable situations where I'm just kind of outside of my body and trying to fend off the anxiety, and I'm not present. But then when I get away from that and I look back on it, I can see myself in the present moment. I can feel myself in the present moment, and I can almost look around and observe what's happening around me, and then I can appreciate that moment more because I'm a little bit separated from it. And my desire would be to not have to wait for me to appreciate any moment, be able to appreciate it now. So anyway, I guess that's my talk for today, and if you would please subscribe, like, comment on this YouTube post, and let me know how you're taking it in, whether you're just listening or you're watching, or you're where you like to listen to it, if you do like to listen to it. I'd really appreciate the feedback, and hope you guys are having a wonderful present moment. Rock on.